Welcome in Rose City to Soccer Made in Portland. Another episode for you here. Ryan Clark, Chris Reifer. Some breaking news this morning. I don't know if we're legally allowed to use that theme song, but it was technically not the exact audio track. It was somebody doing an impression of it, so I think we're fine. But the news being that the Portland Thorns have added several investors to their group, namely some big money investors, including Columbia Sportswear CEO Tim Boyle, who is a billionaire, obviously after decades as CEO of that sportswear giant. Former NBA player Josh Childress among the group, Phoenix Suns co-owner Sam Garvin, and then a pair of folks with connections to the Bethals in the business world, in Kunal Merchant and Nehal Raj, who come from Revitate and from TPG. Obviously, it's a big deal anytime an NWSL team adds this level of investment. But what makes it especially noteworthy is two items. Obviously, the addition of Boyle and his wealth is significant for NWSL. There are not a lot of billionaires that have to this point invested in the league in this way. And secondarily, the Thorns noted in their press release that this will include a build out of new business and philanthropic initiatives, along with the development of a new state-of-the-art training facility, which is a major piece of this and something that they are hoping to keep the wheels rolling on, as they have tried to do from the start of the Bethals takeover of the club. So just reflecting on this news, Chris, and the idea that, people are coming into the club in this way and investing in this way. What is your impression this morning?
This is the kind of thing that happens before the thing that happens. And it's clear that they are ramping up sort of the capital muscle within the organization. And there have been a few things that have been discussed about that I think are hinted at in the reporting that you've done. One, of course, the most obvious, and that wasn't really hinted at as much as it's just said, is the development of a training facility. And they've got some money to spend on a training facility now. They've got some serious muscle behind this initiative now. I think they did before. They certainly had sort of the financial wherewithal with the Bethal family even before this, and now it's just at another level of investment and investability in the club. And so I think that's very good news for the Thorns, and it's the kind of thing that I think piques any Thorns fans' interest about what is coming next. The other thing that I think is notable about this, and the connection that people are immediately going to make, is ties into this is becoming a little bit of a like Bill Oram fan podcast, and I don't like that. I mean, I'm a fan of Bill, but God, this is just getting creepy now.
If you ask a certain segment of Twitter, there are a great deal of people, unfortunately, the last 24 hours that are not big fans of Bill.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't care about those people. So.
Yeah, me either. So
have fun, comrade. Like you enjoy tweeting from Warsaw or whatever.
Yeah.
Or from Moscow and whatever. That's what I say to those people. But back to the matter at issue. The other thing that this is gonna flag in people's minds is that this group looks like it is adding muscle to make a run for a WNBA team. And I think adding that level of investment, which frankly is more investment than is necessary to be a competitive NWSL side, right? More is better, obviously. But the Bethals were fully capable themselves of being a significant player in NWSL, and now they're only building out their ownership group in a way that looks like they have ambitions beyond that. And that very much rhymes with the reporting that Bill has done about the sort of dueling groups that are looking to make a play to get into the WNBA.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's something that is exciting and very interesting to many Thorns fans who would be interested in sort of a women's sports conglomerate empire in the city of Portland. I think it's something that makes a lot of sense from an investment perspective. I think it's a market that makes a ton of sense in terms of its demonstrated record of support for women's sports. And I understand why there are now apparently these competing groups that are looking to bring the WNBA to Portland.
yeah. And that other group, just to note, the other group that is in play here is the Monarch Collective, which is an investment group that is led by a co-founder of Angel City FC. Damian Lillard is apparently involved with that group, according to Bill's reporting, which adds another layer of sort of local heft on that front. Had heard potentially about like current and former NWSL players being involved on that side as well. Nothing obviously confirmed yet as far as Bill's reporting goes. But those are two groups with apparent and serious financial backing. And I think that, yeah, you take a look at what the Bethals have done here. Yes, it's a move for the Portland Thorns, but the question that folks are going to be asking, and I definitely do plan to ask them as a member of the news media, is what are the implications for the WNBA? What is this going to potentially do to help the Bethals in that department? And I think inevitably you add this amount of wealth, you add these connections in sports and particularly basketball with Josh Childress as a former NBA player. You definitely can help solidify your position. That battle, quote unquote, whether they view it as a battle or not, who knows? But to bring a WNBA team here can only, I think, be a good thing, because it creates that sort of level of competition within that marketplace to say, look, there's not only one group of people interested, but there's at least two, and they have this level of financial backing that makes the WNBA possible. Now, this isn't a WNBA podcast, but hey, this is absolutely a women's sports podcast, and this is something that has major implications for women's sports in this city. But for the Thorns
too,
yeah,
it is very much a Thorns podcast, and it has major implications for the Thorns. And so, I think all of that is to say, when you zoom out to the 10,000 foot level, or maybe the 30,000 foot level now, this is clearly a group of people who are reading the writing on the wall, which is that investment in women's sports and meaningful investment, not sort of the superficial investment that we've seen by many in the past, but meaningful investment in women's sports not only produces, something of community value, but it's also a very good investment opportunity, because I think they look across the landscape over the course of the last several years and they see that many of these owners, either in terms of value or in terms of sale proceeds, are printing money when they invest meaningfully. And if you had that kind of financial wherewithal, why wouldn't you want to get in on that?
On the field, the Portland Thorns are still winning games.
Routine, mundane.
Just another W.
Set them up and knock them down.
Set them up and knock them down. They go on the road to Houston, a team that has absolutely struggled this season. There's no doubt about that, and win 2-0. A game that they had a chance to win by a few more goals, but you're happy with the chances you got, and you're happy with the goals you got, and you're happy with the result. 6 in a row now for Rob Gale's Thorns. Heading into a game tomorrow. We're recording this podcast on Thursday.
6 in a row versus 7 in a row, right?
So, yeah, tomorrow is 6 in a row for the Thorns versus seven in a
win.
row for Orlando. They're the two hottest teams undoubtedly in NWSL right now, and you could argue this is like the hottest matchup in terms of win streaks in NWSL history.
These are two of the hottest teams in NWL history coming together right now. It's pretty fun.
It's nuts because the Pride have, I believe, tied the record for most wins in a row set by the Reign. So them beating the Thorns would break that record. The Thorns, if they win, would tie that record a third time over. And they're both playing extremely good soccer right now. This is a dangerous Pride team. Not only is this exciting for a neutral, but I think if you're a Thorns fan, it's nervy and exciting at the same time, because you look at this matchup and you think, okay, this is like the biggest test yet for Gale's group. And, they could be forgiven for maybe taking a step back or slipping up at this point, but you also sort of exist on that expectations tightrope as per usual, right? The idea that they've won 6 in a row, they are back among the elite in the league in terms of the standings, and you want to prove yourself. You want to use this game as a bellwether for where you're at in your development.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the question going into this game is, are the Thorns getting there or are they there? If they go in and they go toe to toe with Orlando and come out with a result, I think you've got to say they're there. Yeah, I think it is fair to look back on the 6-game stretch, which is very good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the Thorns, winning any 6 games in a row is a really, really good accomplishment. So let's not make any bones about that. But it's fair to look back on this stretch and say it's been a little bit of a softer stretch in the schedule. They've played the Dash a couple times, I think, during the stretch. Those are likely results. And overall, it hasn't been a totally soft schedule. They went on the road and won at Chicago. That was a meaningful win against a team that's currently sitting, if I'm remembering the standings right, either 4th or 5th. And so that's a pretty meaningful road win. And so they've had good results and good performances, and I think they've had improving performances over the course of the 6-game stretch, but it's not like they've been giant slayers. Now they're going to have to be giant slayers, and I think the question leading in is whether the Thorns are getting to the point or building to the point where they're truly sort of at performances among the NWSL elite, or if they're there and they are officially full on, no questions asked contenders at this stage of the season. Now, what I mean, sort of the subtext of that question is that I don't think necessarily this performance or this result is going to dictate a whole lot of what happens in the future. Because even implied within are they getting there is that trajectory that they're on, that they're growing and that they can get there. So I don't, if the Thorns, lose this weekend at Orlando, which a lot of people have been doing recently, 7 teams in a row have lost to the Pride. If they go down and lose, I don't. It's not a doomsday scenario by any remote stretch of the imagination, and frankly, I don't think it should affect the good vibes around this team really all that much. But if they go and win, then next week when we talk, we're having a very different conversation. And we're having a conversation about whether this team is going to be competitive for the Shield and whether they're favorites to win the whole thing.
Yeah, it's crazy how those narratives can shift on these axes
real fast.
Yeah, really fast. And this this Pride team, where it starts for them is Barbara Banda,
and maybe the 2 hottest players in NWSL too, going at it, and Sophia Smith and Barbara Banda as well.
Yeah, that's a really exciting matchup, for sure, for neutrals as well. I mean, this is such an exciting match for neutrals, but for the Thorns in terms of like the prove it factor. Obviously in the stretch prior to this win streak, defense was a question. Defending in space was a major question. And they're obviously within the confines of this win streak have been moments where, maybe there has been a reversion to old habits a little bit. You think about that Bay FC game as maybe a prime example. But otherwise, major improvement across the board, not only in defending, but I think in the attacking buildup and everything else has been strong lately. But in that area, in that space with a player as dangerous as Banda, that's a major test for Becky Sauerbrunn, Kelly Hubley, everyone else that's going to be available depending on the international break stuff going on. Not sure who's departed, who's there. I wish I knew off the top of my head so I could rattle that off right now, but either way, no matter who's in those positions, it's a major test, not only in space, but in tight spaces as well, to prevent somebody in Banda who has just been a lethal goal scorer this season for the Pride. It starts there, and then honestly, finishing chances has been a slight bugaboo. I don't want to say it's been a difference maker because they have gotten the results and they scored a ton of goals against the Reign in the previous game to the last one. But you have been getting some of those chances that, like, if you don't finish them against the Pride, you might not get them again in the way that you did against a Houston team that was just gifting you opportunities down the stretch of that game. So, if you're getting chances early and you're throwing everything at the wall in the way that the Thorns like to do, you absolutely have to cash in, because this Pride team could come right back and punch you in the mouth and score a goal or two of their own.
Or 3, as they just did against the Reign on the road. And I think that's right. I'm not super worried about the chance finishing rates. Frankly, in some respects, and this has actually been true both on the Thorn side and the Timber side, at times their chance finishing rates have maybe been a little bit higher than you would expect, especially early in this streak. I think they had some helpful finishing variants that it ebbs back and forth, and the reality of soccer is that most chances, even most good chances, go awry. And so I think the Thorns are kind of just existing a little bit in that space the last week or so. They still scored 2 and 1 at a canter at Houston. That's pretty good after a weird weather break. There are no signs for concern in that respect for me coming out of that game. But you're absolutely right. You're not going to get a ton of chances against Orlando. And that's especially true because you're not going to take a lot of chances against the Pride because of the lethalness that they've got going forward. You're not going to be, you don't want this game to turn into a track meet. You don't want Banda to get into space. And so they're going to be careful about those things, and they're going to rely on the players that they have. The Sophia Smiths starting off, Liv Moultrie, who's getting into much better form than she started the season, which is a very, very welcome development for the Thorns. The Hina Sugitas, even the Christine Sinclairs, to find those moments to punch back and to take their opportunities when they get them. But that's what championship teams do. Right. And so that very much is, the are they getting there or are they there kind of question. And then can they manage the moments in which they're under it a little bit? Because that's going to happen over the course of this game because they're playing at an extremely good team on the road. And so this is very, very, this is a tremendous NWSL game. It is really unfortunate, quite frankly, that it's on at 4:00 Pacific on a Friday. On NWSL Plus. And look, preseason scheduling is what it is. And it can be a challenge. And, I don't think a lot of people sitting on the couch 3 months ago were looking at Thorns at Pride thinking this is going to be a marquee matchup. But this would be kind of a cool one to have on ABC on Sunday morning. Or on early Sunday afternoon, right?
Yeah, this would be... You'd hope that someday, like, the NWSL reaches a caliber within its media deal where they can sort of flex these type of games into prime time. Yeah. That's obviously a long road to something like that, and very few sports leagues in the world have that capability in their media deals. But yeah, this absolutely deserves like a ton of spotlight for what it is.
Yeah. Indeed. And so, the timing of it is a little bit unfortunate in that regard because I think it's going to be, it's just the kind of game that you want to have up on the marquee. And it's the kind of thing that you want to have a ton of media leading into. Banda versus Smith. Like that kind of stuff. I think those are the sorts of stories that the league is getting to a point where it wants those to be big stories leading into games, and they want the games to be in big spotlights. And it's going to be a little bit of, and NWSL media rights are an evolving story, to be sure, but evolving in a pretty positive way, I think, over the course of the last couple of years. But where sort of the rising tide is going to raise all ships kind of thing, that as they get more games in better places at better times, it makes it a lot easier to build in these narratives ahead of the game. Because this is, it's a really interesting one. and it's one that I think a lot of folks, especially in this moment in time, would be very interested in tuning into. So it's unfortunate that it's going to be on Friday at 4:00. but if you are able to nonetheless make the time, sneak out a little bit early, do what you need to do. It's one that I think is going to be as compelling a viewing as maybe any game to date in NWSL.
Yeah, a good afternoon to potentially work remotely from the sports bra if you are so inclined.
Right. Exactly.
That is not sponsored content, but it is a good idea for some who might utilize it. So the Timbers, they had their bounce back moment, and we talked a lot about that last week with the aid of the referees, obviously. And
which, by the way, just to do some rubbing of noses in it, there were a number of folks who were like, "No, I thought it was an okay call." I mean, MLS rescinded the red card. So
they rescinded the red card.
The authorities have weighed in. That only happens a few times a season in the entire league. The authorities have weighed in, and Timbers got a break. They needed one. They got one.
Yeah, and to be sure, they have gotten the opposite in terms of breaks this year. Maybe not to that degree.
To be sure, not nearly to the extent that the grievance parade, and Evander jumped on the grievance parade a little bit this week on Instagram. It needs to stop.
Just
stop the grievance
games.
Parade.
Yeah.
The reason the Timbers are at 0.9 points per game or whatever the heck they're at right now is because they've been poor. It's not because of referees. And so the grievance parade needs to stop because, frankly, even the complaints about getting the short end of the referee stick over the course of the year aren't that great.
Yeah, and I would say
they've had some that have not gone their way. They've had some that have gone their way. Get over it.
For sure. And I would say it's been minimal from Neville. I think that it's mostly come from other places. He's done it a little.
His post game pressers, he's been he's been getting on his horse and joining the grievance parade a little.
Sure,
bit.
but it's been only really part of the picture for him. I think that he has, he's framed it more specifically on team performance and attitude than anything. And speaking to the most recent performance, obviously they fall 2-1 on the road to Minnesota. Not great, obviously. They
also not the worst performance.
Minnesota's
playing really well.
They had a much better performance, I think, than they've had in other losses as of late. But it's one of those like you're happy with the performance, but situations again for them, and it just stinks. Like it was one of those games in a busy week in a tight window where you hope to maybe squeak out a point on the road, but you could be more forgiven for not getting a result in a game like that compared with one where you've got more rest, you've got more players that are key available. But hey, they lose 2-1 and the struggles, I guess, continue for the Timbers.
And look, here's the thing. You can squint for rays of light all you want in performances, and maybe you can even find them. But the thing that's blocking out the sun right now is the fact that they've conceded multiple goals in 10 straight games. MLS record. They did it again, adding to it.
Mike Donovan, shout out for bringing my attention. Yes.
Statman, statting as always. Yeah, I mean, that's blocking out the sun right now. I mean, and the reality is it almost doesn't matter how good other aspects of the performances are. It almost doesn't matter what other progress they make over the course of the season. They're not going to make any meaningful run as long as they're regularly giving up multiple goals. And that doesn't mean they do it every game. Even if they're doing it with frequency, it won't matter. The season will be a failure if they continue doing it. Period. And so, I mean, they can be delightful in many other aspects of the game. And if this doesn't see improvement, and I mean significant improvement, it won't matter. And so, I mean, that kind of is the moral of the story from this last performance is that, there were some things that went better. The Timbers didn't have much of the ball, but I thought they had at least a clearer identity than they have in many games of how they wanted to attack the game. And I think for a while it went pretty well. That said, Minnesota had more chances than you would like to see from, a game in which the Timbers were being fairly conservative defensively. Frank, they weren't. The Loons did not capitalize on those chances. I mean, there were a number of circumstances in which Minnesota had, a pretty good opportunity to put one on frame from a shot from close in that they didn't put it on frame. And Dane St. Clair also on the other end had a good game and pulled out a couple moments that were really important for Minnesota. To be fair, but by and large, they weren't sharp, and then they got sharper, and the Timbers conceded 2 goals in the second half, and the result was familiar. But I mean, it's just the kind of thing where as these multiple goal conceding performances just continue to pile up, the longer that goes without being fixed in a lasting way, and I don't mean like it's totally possible this weekend. They've got SKC at home. The Wiz are terrible. It is totally possible that the Timbers could not concede multiple goals this weekend and could even win the game. But that alone isn't going to do it. It needs to be lasting improvement in this respect. And frankly, the longer it goes before they see this lasting improvement, it's already gone unacceptably long. But the longer it goes without seeing this lasting improvement, I think it just becomes more and more fatal to Phil Neville's job prospects. And, Ned Grabavoy obviously is in that conversation as well, given the amount that they've invested in the roster over the course of the last couple of years. And frankly, given the amount of credibility that Grabavoy put on the line when the Timbers hired Neville, now who knows what the internal decision-making dynamics were there. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it was Grabavoy at the microphone in the press conference saying he believes that Phil Neville is the guy to lead this club. So, kind of putting yourself on the line there. But the longer a streak like this goes, I mean, the more inescapable it becomes that it's just not a well-coached team and that it's not a team that has a clear identity. And that frankly, if it doesn't change in a lasting way soon, it's going to be the end of Phil Neville's coaching career.
And I think to that point, what a lot of folks on the outside have pointed out is that the personnel that exists, in that end of the field for the Timbers is not lacking severely. It seems. I think
Kamal Miller started for a Canada team that finished first in CONCACAF World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, Zuparich is
because
an MLS
they were really
veteran.
Good defensively.
Yeah, they were really good defensively. And I mean, Zuparich being an MLS veteran, Zach McGraw, for the difficulty he's had this season, is
one of
somebody
the best players last year.
That was one of the best players last
Max
year.
Max Crepeau has been one of the best goalkeepers in MLS over the course of the last several seasons.
Claudio Bravo has shown flashes of serious quality. There has been serious struggles for Juan Mosquera, but he's somebody that is undeniably talented when you're talking about players along the back line.
Yeah. So, I mean, I reject completely that this isn't a group that can't perform better than it has. Especially when you sort of take a step back and look at the 11 as a whole. I mean, I think there are things to talk about. There are questions to ask here and there. But when I look at this roster, do I say this is a 0.9 point per game roster? Absolutely not. I think they've got the attacking talent to be in the top 4 in the conference. And I think if you had a strong identity, that it's a defense that could make that work. If they were well organized, if they were well trained. But even short of that, they're performing at an unacceptably low level. And the 10 games in a row conceding more goals is just the kind of thing that just demonstrates that. Case closed. So, I mean, it's a big game, and I say that in kind of a rueful way, that the Timbers have coming up against SKC, because it's the kind of game that if they don't win, you will have been looking at 3 home games in the last 4. Each of those 3 home games were against bottom 4 teams in the conference at the time. And if you're not regularly winning those games, which games are you going to regularly win?
Yeah, this is like the get back no flukes game, right? Like it's like you don't want to say that a result happened entirely as a result of a quote unquote fluke, but they got as much help as they possibly could in that San Jose game, and it was a good.
And they were down 2-0 in the 70th minute.
Yes, and it was a good vibes restoration to get the result, but by no means did it fully and completely restore the vibes. You can get towards that direction with a convincing victory over a cellar dwelling team in SKC at your place, a place that they historically have not had a lot of luck. We remember that 7-2 thrashing, which featured some hilarity from Sebastian Blanco in the post game presser. Good memes there for sure for me on the beat. But that was a wild night. This is that opportunity. Obviously, every game is an opportunity, but this is one of those major ones, especially considering the quality of the teams that you have on your schedule. Now, they're on the road at Austin for their following game 4 days after that, but then they're back home against Houston. So big stretch. Every stretch is big when you've gotten to this point with so few points in the season. But yeah, it's definitely like toasty buns time for multiple people in positions of serious power for this club. So it's a matter of the players not only getting the results but buying in.
Yeah, no question. And complaining about the referees doesn't help that. So so we'll see. We'll see which Timbers team shows up. I mean, the Timbers team that we've seen against teams with 11 players hasn't been good over the last long while. The Timbers team playing against a team that had 10 players, they seem better if they can play 11v10. But they're probably going to have to play this one full on 11v11 unless something goes their way once again. And the bottom line is they can't rely on the referees to improve their performance. They have to improve their performance, and they've got to do it themselves. And the only folks who have control over that are the players on the roster and the coaches guiding them. Period.
Kickoff for the games this weekend, 4:00 Friday for Orlando versus Portland Thorns. That's a big one. Get yourselves to wherever it is possible for you to watch that game, because that's as big as it gets in NWSL. And then the Timbers, 7:30 p.m. on Saturday at Providence Park versus Sporting Kansas City. Another home game for the Timbers to try and get themselves back in some sort of rhythm in what's been a pretty rough season for Phil Neville and company. So, Chris, any parting thoughts, any wisdom to impart upon the dear listeners of this podcast?
I'm just going to go full on Bill Oram fan podcast. He wrote a column earlier this week. I thought it was fantastic.
It was fantastic.
Column about the OSAA state track meet. And the discussion around it. I won't go too deep into it because I think Bill's words stand for themselves. I thought it was a tremendous column. Those are my parting words. And I swear to everything good and holy, I will not talk about Bill next week.
Unless Bill continues to do what he does and drive discussions that are important and get some nice scoops, then maybe we will be talking about Bill. But
yeah, but I'll be pretty salty about it if it's 3 weeks in a row.
Don't want to give him too much credit. Love the guy. But yes, agreed on Bill's column. I think it's absolutely an important discussion, and one that he pointed out needs to be centered around humanity.
Yeah, and it needs to be had by
empathy.
serious people, not internet trolls.
Yes, completely. Serious adults that care not only about the competition, which is infinitely less important than the human element of the situation,
and empathy and
the
inclusion.
safety of a child and inclusion of people who are the most at risk in our society. Very good points made across the board by Bill, and I would encourage everyone to read his column regardless of where you fall on this issue. It's incredibly important discussion to be had, and one that, as we said, is often lacking empathy. So,
and the bottom line is all other issues aside, if you are a person sitting in stands at a high school sporting event and you are booing a 16 or 17-year-old because they won, it's time to do some serious self-reflection just about the quality of the human that you are.
look in the mirror, folks. That is my final imparting message for everyone out there. But you can follow us on what can be a bit of a cesspool of a platform, Twitter, at Ryan T. Clark, at Chris Reifer.
It can be nice too.
It can be funny. It can be nice.
It all depends on the neighborhood you're in.
But I'm glad for anyone that may delete that app off their phone temporarily, hoping for Bill's sake that he did. Soccer Maiden PDX is our other handle. You can like us, subscribe to us wherever you get your pods. Follow Oregonian Sports wherever you get your podcasts. For this one, Ducks Confidential, Beaver Banter, the Blazers Focus podcast, everything we got rolling, including the Oregonian Sports podcast, which Bill Oram and Brenna Green are doing a great job on there. So keep an eye out for all those pods, and we will catch you again soon.